Okay, yeah, nice. So we're carrying on with the writing to advise work and looking today at presentation. As you can see from the title, we've got appropriate presentation and structure. Let's just have a read through what's on this page. The next stage in presenting a text is to look at the way it appears on the page to the reader. Writers choose the most appropriate layout for their purpose to get the attention of their readers. Choosing the right font, letter size, punctuation, spacing, and colour can all influence the way readers respond to a written material. These are known as presentational devices. If you think about if somebody gives you a piece of writing to read and it is just a plain white piece of paper full of writing and said, here, this is really important information, you need to read it through. Sometimes it can look a little bit overwhelming. It just looks like loads and loads of writing. It might look a bit boring. Whereas if we look at this example underneath, drugs, what's the big deal? You can see they've used different presentational devices. We've got different fonts, we've got different letter sizes, we've got lots of different types of punctuation in here. So we've got, as you can see just in the title, ellipsis, we've got question marks. They've used big spaces between the paragraphs so it looks like less writing to read. They've got colour, so some of the words are written in colour, like the keywords, to make them stand out. Some of the words are underlined. So I've got loads of different ways in which this looks like a little bit more of an interesting piece of writing. Now, if you did the lesson on Friday, you will recognise this piece of writing because it is exactly the same piece of writing that we read through on Friday. Let me just skip back and show you that piece of writing and how it looks different. Okay, so this is exactly the same piece of writing that we looked at when we did the piece of writing for teenagers about using drugs in sports. This is exactly the same piece of writing, but it's just written in a slightly different way or presented in a slightly different way. So hopefully by looking at them both, you can see the differences that the presentation actually makes. It looks like a very different piece of writing. So we're going to do a couple of activities based on this. So firstly, if we look at activity 6 at the top of the page, it says work with a partner. You can do it on your own or you can get a family member to help you with this, to make a list of the ways in which the writer has used presentational devices to appeal to his audience. So think about different ways in which colour has been used, different ways in which the text has been laid out on the page. So thinking there about things like paragraph sizes, fonts, and also the use of punctuation. How has the writer used punctuation to appeal to a teenage audience? Okay, so you should spend probably 5 to 10 minutes looking back at the piece of writing and thinking about how colour, layout and punctuation have been used to help this piece of writing appeal to the teenage audience. When you've done that, we're moving on to activity 7. And this time it's linking back to the work that we did last lesson because you'd written 3 to 4 paragraphs advising young people about not using drugs in sports. Your task now is to represent this text using the techniques you've identified. So the piece of writing you did last lesson would have been just 3 or 4 paragraphs written out normally on a piece of paper. I want you to think about how you can use presentational devices to improve that piece of writing, to make it appeal more to the teenage audience that it's aimed at. So think about how you can use bold writing, how can you use different types of font, how you can use background colour, spacing your writing out, underlining keywords or making keywords stand out by doing them in a different colour, adding in pictures. All of those sorts of things will really improve this piece of writing. So let's have a look through the 5 steps that we've got. Step 1, think about the following: the needs of the audience. What sort of presentation will appeal to them? Now you are teenagers writing this, so think about the sort of thing that you might be interested in. Think about the sort of thing that you would pick up and think, oh, this looks quite interesting, I'll have a read of this. Think about the background colour for your text. It's nice to have a background colour underneath a piece of writing, but make sure it's not too dark that you can't actually see the writing on top of it, or that the two colours don't clash so it makes it difficult to read. Think about the headings you're going to use and how you're going to emphasize them. Are you just going to do them in bigger writing? Are you going to do them in different colors? Are you going to do them and underline them? How are you going to make your headings stand out? What words do you want to emphasize in the text? And again, how are you going to do that? Are you going to use different color for the writing? Are you going to do it slightly larger or bold? Are you going to underline them? Are you going to do like a different color bubble around the key words? Think about how you're going to make these key words stand out. Again, underneath, using colour and different fonts to make different words stand out. How are you going to use punctuation such as question marks, dashes and ellipses to emphasise your meaning? And how and where will you use underlining? So lots of different presentational features that you can use in here. One thing to remember is don't go over the top with it. You don't want every single word standing out, else they won't stand out because they're all in different colours and they're all underlined or they're all in bold. So we just want to make sure it is the key words, the really important things or important messages that are standing out to the reader. Step 2 then, redraft and refine your work. So begin by working on the written text. Check that you've used a variety of sentences to put your ideas across. This was what we were focusing on last week. Check that the language you've used is the sort of language that's used by young people. Does it sound too formal? Do you need to make it sound a little bit more informal? Check that your paragraphs are short. You don't want to have too much writing for your audience to read, else they'll look at it and think that's too much, can't be bothered to read it. So keep it short, keep it to the point. Check that your text has a conversational tone. Does it sound chatty? Does it sound like you're talking to a friend? And have you written mainly in the present tense? Step 3, show your work to a partner, again, family member, somebody at home with you. Ask them to have a look at where you've used different presentational techniques. Ask them if they think the keywords are standing out. Maybe you've done it a bit too much, maybe you've not quite done it enough. Then step 4, look closely at the presentation of your text. Check that it looks interesting enough to attract your reader's attention. Check that your headings do stand out. Check that you've used different sizes and different fonts, and check that you've used punctuation to emphasize your meaning. And then finally, when you've made any alterations you think necessary, you can present the final draft. So have a go at actually drafting out and creating this leaflet. Remember, it's only going to be about 3 or 4 paragraphs of writing. Today, the focus is on the presentation of it. Again, and with all your pieces of work, if you want to send me copies of what you've done, and you could do this leaflet, you could design it on the computer or by hand on a scrap of paper, whatever you've got handy at home. Think about how you can present it, send me a picture of it or email it to me. It'd be lovely to see how you've presented your work. Okay, you should give yourself probably about 20 minutes on this. Off you go.